Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up, and I get that we're already midway through November, but I guess like better late than never. I had a pretty good reading month in October. I read 9 books and I managed to stick to my TBR fairly well, so like good on me, I guess. But I did want to go through them and let you know what I thought. So I'm going to be talking about these books in the order that I read them. So the first one that I read in October is called The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. And this one was just a really enjoyable read. It was about 3 women who are very different from each other who come to work at Bletchley Park as code breakers during World War II. So it sort of skips back and forth through time during World War II while they're learning the job and full on in the war. And then 7 years later, where you discover that Beth is in an asylum against her will, and then the other 2 hate each other's guts and hate Beth as well. There's some betrayal that happened, but they have to basically come together to try to figure out who the traitor was during their time at Bletchley Park. I loved the characters. Ozza was such a fun character to read. Just the way she spoke, and the fact that she sort of writes this gossip column that is at the beginning of every chapter was really fun. And I really loved this sort of theme, and it comes up in other books, so it's obviously a theme that I'm interested in, is just, when a betrayal happens and like how do you learn to forgive. So I think I did a really good job of that, and I gave it 4 stars and would definitely recommend it to anybody who loves historical fiction. But it is set in World War II, but I wouldn't say that it's like heavily centered necessarily around the war, but that's the setting, and it's more about this mystery and their relationships. So really good, and you should definitely pick it up. The next one wasn't so great. It's was Goblin by Josh Malerman, and I'm starting to realize about Josh Malerman that he has like a major phobia of a good ending or any like ending to his stories. Because I read A House at the Bottom of the Lake, and while I love that story, I would say that the weakness was probably its ending. And then this one was 6 novellas set in this creepy town called Goblin. And every single one of these stories had like a nothing burger ending. So I gave this book a 2 stars, and I really like the last 2 stories. Like I was kind of done and I just skimmed, and again, it was really much the same thing. They had so much promise, and like I do believe that Josh Malerman has great ideas, but he just can't seem to execute them fully. The best part of this book was definitely the beginning. It starts out with this sort of delivery guy who's almost at the end of a shift, and he gets one delivery where he's paid triple to deliver this box to Goblin, and there's some very specific instructions. So that was such a good start, and it was so creepy and interesting. But when the prologue is the best part of the book, like that something went wrong. So I can't say that I would recommend this one, but I still think that I would probably pick up another work from Josh Malerman just to see if maybe there's some book where he can write a good ending. The next one that I chose was just one that I found in my library. It's called Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. And this one's a really short one and a very strange book. So if you're not into like weird vibes, I don't know, probably not a book for you, but it was really interesting and unique. It is about a woman and her father, and they look human, but they definitely aren't human. I think they've come from the ground, but they act as the healers in this town. So people come to them with their ailments, and they basically heal them by either like opening them up and like, cleaning out their organs in some kind of magical way, or actually like burying them in the ground for a week. And the town kind of like puts up with their oddness because of the results. And so, yeah, this one, I would say, like, if I were to compare it to anything, I would say it's like somewhat Frankenstein, somewhat Pet Sematary. That seems like very strange, and if you've read it, you might say like, what are you talking about? But that's what it reminded me of. So I don't know that I loved this book. I gave it 3 stars, but I definitely thought it was very like atmospheric, somewhat disturbing, and definitely unique. So one to think about picking up. All right, so the next book that I read in October is called Calling My Spirit Back by Elaine Alec. And Elaine Alec is an Indigenous woman in British Columbia. And I actually had the good fortune of meeting her. She is a community planner, and I'm also a planner. And so I got to hear a bit about her story and then decided to pick up this book. And I'm really glad that I did. It's not a long book, but it was very beautiful, well written, and follows her healing journey from her trauma, so healing and learning to love herself. And then it also, I'll just read a little bit here. It says, people from all backgrounds have embraced concepts from other parts of the world that promote self-love, healing, and well-being through practices of discipline and meditation. Very little has been shared about Indigenous systems and how it promotes self-love and approaches to healing. And this is definitely what this book was about as well. So I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was such a worthwhile read. She's definitely gone through a lot, and she's very honest in her book. And I think that many people could get a lot out of it. So if you're interested in something like that, if you're Canadian, or maybe just interested in learning more about one Indigenous person, I think this one would be an awesome one to pick up. So after that, I went back to my TBR and picked up The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James, another Canadian author. And I think that this one was a solid read. I'm starting to realize that I might not be fully into mystery thrillers. I keep picking them up and I'm sort of somewhat disappointed by them quite often, but this one was really good. It had a paranormal aspect, and so basically the premise is that this woman's aunt, I believe in the 80s, I can't fully recall, went to work at the Sundown Motel, and then she went missing and has never been heard from again. And then this woman basically goes to the Sundown Motel years later to try to figure out what happened to her aunt. And so she starts working there and realizes quickly that like there is some super strange stuff going on at this motel. So paranormal, but also sort of a mystery trying to solve the disappearance of her aunt and some murders of other women that have happened in this sort of bizarre, creepy town. I thought it was really fun. I was gripped the whole way through and gave it 4 stars. It had the spooky season vibes and the dark vibes that you'd be looking for this time of year. The next one, oh my goodness, I sobbed and sobbed with this one. I think my husband was like, what is wrong with you? Because I was like doing like the ugly cry with this book. So it's called The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Irokawa. And I gave this one 5 stars. This one is a book that was written in Japanese and translated into English. And so it definitely has a sort of different cultural feel to it. It follows a cat that was a stray that was adopted by this man, and the cat is the narrator, and so he's got such a funny personality, very much what you would expect a cat to be like. And it basically goes with him and his master driving around Japan and visiting different people, with the premise of this man's trying to find a new home for this cat. So he keeps trying to find the right home for his stray cat that he can no longer keep. And it was so sweet and heartfelt, and yeah, it's a very cozy read, one that I would want to pick up in the fall for sure, with a cozy blanket and tea, that kind of vibe. So pick it up this time of year. Some people have said, like, one criticism I've heard about this one is it's like a little bit too twee, a little bit too, cutesy. And I can totally understand that criticism, but I didn't care. Like, I just didn't expect this to be like, a perfect novel. It was what it was, and it was so enjoyable and sweet and heartfelt. So yeah, it was a bit twee, but I didn't mind at all, and would highly recommend you pick up this book. Okay, so the next book is also a 5 stars, but it is entirely different. I picked up Helter Skelter, The True Story of the Manson Murders by Vincent Bugliosi with Kurt Gentry, and it was phenomenal. I'm actually kind of surprised that I picked it up because it's about 700 pages, and although I'm interested in what happened with Charles Manson and his followers, it is a pretty big book, and I had been told that it mostly follows the trial, and so I mean, that sounds interesting, but a 700-page book about a trial could potentially be boring. But anyways, I gave it a go, and I am so glad I did. This is the perfect example of the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. I cannot believe that this crazy dude, Charles Manson, managed to have so many people, and like mostly young women, follow him and commit murder for him. And they were such true believers in him that even during the trial, they were willing to basically lie to protect him. Like they thought he was the next, the second coming of Jesus Christ. So yeah, like, I would say that it is not for people who are sensitive. It is very disturbing because this is a true story, and it was a very evil couple murders, and these people were like totally off their rockers. But I just couldn't believe how well written the book was, how enthralling it was, and it totally boggled my mind what happened. And in the trial, like you think, okay, we're in the trial, like what happened is now in the past, but horrible events were still happening within the trial. One of the defense attorneys disappeared and was later found to be murdered. The family members were, threatening people and trying to free Charles Manson. It was unbelievably entertaining and enthralling the entire way through. And I just could not believe it. Like I was gasping out loud at sections of this book. So I will also say that, Vincent Bugliosi was a prosecuting attorney, so you get some really in-depth knowledge. And I did not find this to be gratuitous the way it was written, but it is a disturbing book. It's not for the faint of heart, but I think it holds up. And it was written in 1974, I believe, which was 5 years after the murders and 4 years, I think, after the trial. And even after, they were still discovering things that happened. And I believe there was murders that happened even after the book was written. So holy smokes, if that sounds at all interesting to you, if you want to know what happened, this is the book to read. And you will realize that there are some strange things that happen in this world. Highly recommend it. So then moving on from that, which was a high, even though it was such a crazy story, I read The One by John Mars, and I've heard this one highly recommended. I'm still, like I said, I'm still not fully convinced that the mystery thriller genre is the genre for me, but I have to say this was a very entertaining book. The premise is that this scientific discovery has occurred where you can submit your DNA and this company can basically find your true match, that the one person that is the one for you. So, that sounds wonderful and people are all excited because, now you don't have to go on Tinder and like deal with the dating scene. You can just submit your DNA and find the person and basically be in a relationship is meant to be. But this book basically goes through all these different characters and these different scenarios of the implications of it. Like imagine if you're in a loving relationship and you do this DNA test and you find out you're not matched with the one. Like obviously relationships would disintegrate. Or what happens if you're matched with somebody who is like, insane or a murderer or something like that. So I thought that it was a really great thought experiment and was really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. It was such an easy read. I think maybe my only criticism with it was I was kind of like, what genre is this truly? Because it felt like psychological thriller, but also like a romance book. So yeah, maybe that didn't sit with me perfectly, but I think that if you picked it up, you would not be disappointed and would find it to be a quick and fun read. So the last book that I read in October was another short one, but it was such a fun read, and it was just perfect for the time of year because I read it during Halloween, and I read it as an audiobook. So it's called Dark Waters by Catherine Arden, and it's the third book in her series. I think it's going to be a series of 4. So the first one's called Small Spaces, the second is Dead Voices, and then this one is Dark Waters. And so fall, winter, spring, and I think the next one is going to be set in summer. And it follows these 3 young kids, and they've been through a lot in the previous books, and so they're just, trying to get their lives back together, and then, again, they find themselves in another horrible situation with the smiling man and a monster this time. So they're on a boat, and there's a horrible sea monster. And, you think that middle grade horror wouldn't be that scary, but I was listening to this audiobook in bed with the lights off, like before I went to sleep, and I needed to turn the light on because there was a scene where I found it so scary. So I think that it is enjoyable whether you're, a kid or an adult. And if you're looking for a quick audiobook, this one was a really fun one as well. So highly recommended. I gave it 4 stars. I think I've given them all 4 stars. So it's a very consistent series, and I'm looking forward to the 4th and final book in the series. Anyways, that's all the books that I read in October. It was a really fun reading month, and I'm hoping that there's something on here that sounds interesting to you. I'd love to know in the comments below what you read in October, if you read any of the same books that I read and what you thought about them, or if you have any recommendations for me for my reading for the rest of the year. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.